On this episode of the Wounded Warriors in Action podcast, WWIA founder and CEO John McDaniel is on location in the Northwoods at Camp Hackett as he begins the quest of a lifelong dream of filling an otter tag. John discusses the unique opportunity, challenges, and process of trapping, and the lifestyle habits of otter, while also delving into the various wildlife and habitat found throughout the wilderness of Camp Hackett. Let's join John now.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, good day. My name is John McDaniel, and I am the host of the Wounded Warriors in Action, the WWIA Podcast, Honor, Connect, and Heal. And today, I'm going to talk about trapping otter. I know it's kind of an obscure, different topic for most folks, but hey, I wanted to chat a little bit about that because I'm fascinated by it, and I came all the way up here to northern Wisconsin, Camp Hackett, southeast of the town of Phillips, where the foundation has a chunk of property that I used to own, and it's 410 acres of wild and remote property, and it is nestled in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. And it's way, way, way up there. And just so you know, I'm looking, it's March, okay? It's end of March 2022. And I'm looking outside right now, and it's snowing, and it's been snowing for 4 days at the end of March. The temperatures out there right now are in the low 20s. Tonight they'll dip down into the teens. Tomorrow, which is Sunday, I'm told it's going to, get back up to 30. So this is a very unforgiving place, and so it's one of the few, bastions of remote wildness, wilderness left in the country today. This is not for the weak nor faint of heart up here. The summer times are hot and beautiful, of course. But there's, you're always fighting the elements up here, and that's why I love it. This is just, it's an amazing place. And so anything that's out there in the woods is tough. Okay. If you can survive out there, you're tough. And, I am going to talk a little bit, about wolves. Okay. But let me set the scene. Otters and wolves and other fur bears is, I think, what we're going to chat about mostly. But this is my rookie season, for pursuing otter, for trapping otter. And I'm allowed one otter. I am a Wisconsin registered trapper. I took my trapping course back in 2007. So this is my 15th year. I did a little trapping as a boy growing up, but never, serious trapping like I've been doing for 15 years. I say serious trapping. I mean, if I lived up here, I would do it all winter and all spring, because I love it. But I do take it very seriously. So I am consider myself a good trapper, but what I know pales in comparison to what I don't know, like most disciplines, I suppose. But I take it very, very seriously. Everything from my truck, the traps. I say the truck, all of the the traps and the accoutrements, different types of traps, and how to prepare them, and all the tools that you need. I mean, I take that very, very seriously. So I am trying to do this as well as it can be done. And a lot of this is tradecraft, believe it or not. Trappers who, go out there for, for the majority of their life as trappers, 99% of that is done solo. So it's a very solitary endeavor, if you will. So, and I don't like that. I like being out there by myself, with an element of I suppose there is some danger and some risk, although it's not high, not like going into combat or anything like that. But anyway, it's to me it's fascinating. I love it, and I'm going to talk about that because hopefully there'll be other people who listen to this and go, I think I'm going to try that. But anyway, I got lots to talk about here. The first thing, I will say is, like with most complicated endeavors, you say, what's complicated? It is complicated. This trapping is complicated, and it's meticulous if you do it right. And playing the scent game, if you will. I mean, these critters, they live out there. They are very, very much in tune, as you would expect them to be, with their environment. Change in their environment. Different scents, different perspectives, things that change, things that don't look right. The whole game out there is basically survival and procreation. They need to eat, and they need to not get eaten. And I'll just tell you, here this camp here, Camp Hackett, this is what we call it. Camp Hackett is 370 contiguous acres back there. That's half a section. And it's a wonderful piece of property. It's mostly forested. It's a combination of forest and low-lying swampy areas. Okay, and there is a water system that goes through it. It's a tributary. It's an unnamed tributary of the Jump River. And trust me, that dude is flowing now, even though, we've got, we're still in the clutches of winter here, but it's the last part of winter. When I got up here, I've been up here for 8 days now. It was in the 40s for several days, and things melted rapidly, and that river back there, the tributary, broke up. And, at first there was just a few pockets of open water. And then as the days progressed with, 40-degree temperatures and even, 30-degree temperatures, the tributary back there broke up. So there's lots of ice flows, and the water began to move, and things are actually underneath the snow and the ice are actually turning green. Can you believe that? Turning green. There's still 2 feet of snow out there, and underneath it, things are starting to grow. I just gotta love it. And the growing season up here is very, very short. But anyway, so now you just kind of, explain predation for a second. It doesn't have much to do with otters, because I guess, otters are predators, of course, but, they're mostly after fish, and they will eat animals, small animals, if they're hungry, and they can catch a mouse as an example, they would certainly eat that, but they prefer fish. And mussels, and crustaceans, things like this that they can find and forage and eat, and their metabolism is very, very high. And they have these, they call them otter latrines, like a toilet, same thing. Military calls the toilet the latrine, and otters have latrines, believe it or not. But because their metabolism is so high that they're passing what they eat within an hour. So if they're in a little tributary, say over back here on the property, and I've found a couple of otter latrines, and I'll talk about that in a minute, but you can see they're scat, and they'll go down into the river, find a clam or a fish, eat it, and then stay there for a couple hours as long as the hunting is good, and eat until they're full. But then they'll have to use the latrine. So right there. Within an hour, they're digesting and then passing, whatever their body doesn't need. And so they create these little, latrines. Very a good thing to know if you're a trapper, because then you can say, that's sign. When we say the word, sign, that's what that is. Tracks in the snow are sign, and they've got five little toes, okay? And you've probably seen them on TV where they're, sliding in the snow and frolicking on their back, eating a clam or something like that. They're fascinating little critters. And their pelts are very valuable. Now, I don't sell any of my pelts. I have them all tanned. I put them in the lodge or in my home, and I just admire the pelts. And I don't have any otter pelts. This is the first time in 15 years that I was fortunate enough to get an otter tag. So, to me, this is my rookie season in pursuing otter. So I've never really had the cause to learn about them and target them specifically as a species, but I do now. because I got an otter tag. So I'm super excited about that. But I'll tell you, as a property owner back here, I've spent 16 years now improving the habitat back there for all critters. I've poured my heart and soul, and so have many others, into creating a wildlife paradise. So you have to give back. And I will tell you that we and me, and, specifically, lots of people have given a lot to this land. We have given way, way, way more than we've taken. We've never had a hero up here in 15 years of hunting and fishing with heroes in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, here on this property. Now, we archery hunt for white-tailed deer, and we hunt for rough grouse. And, we also do some duck and geese hunting, and then we fish for muskie. That's our deal up here. But in that 16 years, no hero's ever harvested a buck. Okay, nobody's ever shot a deer up here. Now that ought to, you ought to be raising your eyebrow like, huh? Yeah, and that's true. Now it's archery hunting, so it's it's a little more challenging. But there are other properties in Wisconsin where the foundation is, and the guys are having way more opportunities, to harvest and kill a whitetail buck than we are here. And you go, well, why is that? This is the original mission. You've been doing this longer than anywhere. Well, why aren't the heroes killing, monster whitetails on your property? And the answer is, quite frankly, the carrying capacity of this particular of the Northwoods of Wisconsin for white-tailed deer, or any species other than the wolves, and I'll get to them again, the Northwoods Taliban, as I like to call them. I'll get to that, but the reality is the carrying capacity. There's not a lot of food and nutrition up here in these Northwoods. It's not like down below, and in the farmlands and the dairy lands, where you've got a ton of food for these. The animals can eat soybeans and alfalfa and of course corn. And so, down below, if you will, south of Wausau, about 2 hours south of here, it's agricultural land. And I think Wisconsin harvests more deer than any other state in the nation. It's an absolute ton. I don't know how many hundreds of thousands, but 200,000-300,000 deer are harvested annually in a very short season up here in Wisconsin. But yet, in 15 years, no hero's ever killed a buck at Camp Hackett. And there's a reason for that. And mostly the reason is, I'm just going to give you a news flash here. The reason very specifically that that's not happened is because of the wolves. And that's my opinion. I know this property better than anybody. I've spent way more time on it than anybody in the last 16 years. And there's wolf sign every time you go out there. And they run Thunderdome. Okay, that is an apex predator with no peer competitors. Okay, the bears eat a lot of deer, mostly the fawns. Those bear, as soon as the does give their fawns in the springtime, those bear have got a nose for that, and they eat a lot of fawns. But the wolves eat anything. And if you were out there post-holing in 2 feet of snow, these wolves are just going to run you down, because they don't weigh as much. They're able to walk right on top of the snow for the most part, and when it's hard and crusty. And if you were a deer and you were out there, you're just ringing the dinner bell. As a matter of fact, I've been out there for 8 days, every day, all day long. Okay, other than sitting in this Airstream, trying to stay warm, or in the bunkhouse, cooking a meal and prepping my gear and sleeping, I am in the woods. And so I thought I'd take this morning here and record my adventures and talk about otter trapping, and otters in particular. But anyway, the wolves, and I'll get back to otters. I had to talk about the wolves. At the end of the day, wolves have been delisted, then relisted, and and the feds are involved, and judges in California are involved, and I don't know what a judge in California, what he knows about what's going on out here. I think he knows nothing, or she knows nothing about what's going on in the Northwoods. You want to know what's going on in the Northwoods? Go to the Northwoods, and I'll tell you what's going on. What's going on is that the wolves are running rampant. Okay, and the DNR established a target back in the 1980s. I know, I was here. Okay, I was hunting in the Northwoods in the late 1970s and the early 80s. When I was in high school, I was up here with my dad hunting, and I remember the DNR announcing that the gray wolf was going to be reintroduced into Wisconsin, and I thought, oh, how cool is that? Now, mind you, I think wolves are super cool, and I'm happy they're here, super happy they're here. My issue is that there's no counterbalance. There hasn't been any counterbalance since 1980 when they reintroduced them. All right. They've had like one season or two seasons here in the last, I don't know. Well, ever since then, I think they've had 2, maybe 3 seasons that were open for 4 days, and then they got closed down because they met their quota. How do you meet a quota of 350 wolves, or whatever the quota was set at, in 2 days, or 3 days? It ought to tell you something. There's too many of them. Right now, they estimate the population at being, I don't even know, I don't want to say, but it's, it's something, way above 350. And it's way short of what I think the population is. But nonetheless, it's probably, 3,000 to 4,000 wolves, and that's crazy. They're eating machines. And then they have, litters, and those litters have litters, and their litters have litters. And the next thing you know, then they've got to eat. And what do you think they eat? They eat anything they can get their hands on. And so, I will tell you, 8 days, there's wolf tracks back there. I've seen 4 different sets of wolf tracks. I think my presence back there disrupts their normal, rhythm, if you will. And there are no deer back here, and it's mostly because they'll get eaten right now, especially with the snow. And now down below, it's 30 minutes to get into town from here. All right, and I've been into town a couple of times in the evening to do some chores, laundry sort of thing. And I saw more deer in the fields down there. Now that's ag down there. It's just 30 minutes away, but there's farmland down there, and there's some cut cornfields from last year. And I saw, I counted over 300 deer, and they're all down there. And it's encouraging, They're 30 minutes away, and there's lots of deer down there, but there's none out here right now. And it's because of the wolves. Because if you come out here and you're a deer, you're going to get eaten. And that's the bottom line. And I'm just saying, as an advocate, as a sportsman, you ought to be able to buy a wolf tag over the counter in Wisconsin. All right. Now, the DNR, if you're in the DNR, you ought to listen to this. Okay, here's my idea. Check it out. All right. So people think, the wolves are so pretty. They are pretty, and they have a place up here. All right. They really do. Okay. But they need to have a counterbalance, and that counterbalance is called MAN. It's man. Right, man's the counterbalance to wolves. And if the DNR were smart, they would sell tags over the counter, and everybody and their brother would buy a wolf tag. Okay, and nobody would shoot a wolf. Maybe not nobody, but a few people probably would. But I can't even tell you how many hundreds of thousands of hours I got in these woods. And you know how many times I've seen wolves, like face to face? Oh, look, there's a wolf. 3 times, okay, in my entire life of hunting up here, because they're tricky, they're smart, and they don't mostly come out at night. They mostly come out at night. They're not going to just walk out in the middle of a food plot, and mosey around. They're very coy, they're cunning, and they're eating machines. But if you issued tags over the counter, everybody and their brother would buy them, okay, and the DNR would raise a ton of money. And very few wolves would be shot. The only way you're going to get these wolves is by trapping them, and you got to be smart. That's how they do it in British Columbia. That's how they do it in Montana. All these places where, wolves have man as a counterbalance. The woods are in harmony. They're in disharmony out here because the Northwoods Taliban's run around rampant. All right, I'm done on wolves. That's how you fix the problem. You allow hunters to buy an over-the-counter tag. Everybody buys one and nobody shoots one, and you make a ton of money. Well, they'll shoot a few. But you got to let guys like me go out there and trap them. That's what you got to do. Okay? One tag a year. That's what a guy ought to be able to apply for, or not apply for, but receive over the counter. Okay? I'm going to take a drink of coffee. Okay, so back to my otter. So these little guys, right? So I think the last thing I said, they have like 5 toes. They slide around, run around, they eat, they have little latrines. They love the waterways. They'll go cross country, and their range is anywhere from 20 to 60 miles. Like that's a lot. Think about that. And so I've seen several fresh sets of sign out there where they were, that's an otter. Look, there's the 5 toes. Look, there's the tail dragon in the snow. And oh, look, there's a latrine. Check it out. Wow. So I found that back there. In 8 days, I've found ample signs. So it's good news. But I was worried about, molesting the area when I get back in there. And there's thinking that I have to get back there. I have to, cross this guy's track. And I didn't want to do that. I thought, well, if I cross his track and he comes back the same way, he's going to see my tracks and that's going to spook him, this kind of thing. Well, the reality is that they haven't doubled back on their own tracks. See, they have obviously these territories that they're going out, places that they know where they can find food. And, they're just out there ranging, doing that. But they do have families. Okay? And typically this time of year, what happens is the male and the female mate. Okay. And then in their den or wherever they do that. And then after that's occurred, the male typically takes off and he goes out looking for other females to do the same thing. And this time of year, his range is anywhere from 20 to 60 miles, and he's obviously out there foraging for food, but he's also looking for other partners, other female otters. And then I guess after he gets done doing his thing, he goes back to the tent. And I jokingly said the other day about that is that apparently she's fine with that. I don't know. But anyway, so that's the life of an otter for the most part. And their pelts are very valuable. Actually, trapping has a huge part in American history, in the expansion westward and commerce and all of this. I mean, I think you could make a pretty strong argument that the trappers, were a keystone part, if you will, or as an entity, a keystone entity in the establishment and expansion of our country. It's a fact. And the fur trade with the French, the Indians, the Europeans, etc. I mean, the beaver, the otter, the muskrat, the deer hides, the Wisconsin whitetail, or whitetails in general, their hides are valuable. That's where the word buck comes from. A hide used to be worth $1, $1, $1 a deer hide, Now it's about $7. But anyway, yeah. So that's what they do. These otters. And for years there was no. You couldn't harvest them. You had to apply for a tag, and I applied every year. And finally, 15 years down the road, I got an otter tag. So I came up here to literally dedicate and immerse myself into learning about and trying to trap an otter. And it's day 8. I've got 2 days left in my trap line before I got to go back to Florida. But I haven't successfully trapped an otter. I'm dying to go out there today. I'm going to wait, till this afternoon to do that. But then check my trap line. You got to check your trap line every day. Okay. And I've got working out there right now. I've got 5 traps in 2 different sets, locations. And I changed things up last night, so I'm super excited about going out there. But then, of course, the temperature dropped. And, now it's, I'm sure that my sets that are, they're all in the water, okay? Some of them are probably frozen solid. I've probably got 1 or 2 sets that are still viable given how cold it got overnight. But that's the thing, is I've been up here for 8 days battling the elements, going back there every day. I got holes in my waders. I've been through, I've got 2 sets of waders. One's no longer any good because I got punched holes in it out there. And, so I'm out there wading in the tributaries and the creeks and the ponds. I'm staying off the beaver ponds. They're pretty dangerous. I don't up here by myself, I fall through a beaver pond. That would be a bad thing. But, so I'm being careful and looking for sign, setting up where there is sign. And it's just fascinating to me, the art and science of outsmarting one of these critters, and the actual physical possession of one is something, that I would really enjoy, respect it more than I can say. So like I was saying to open the podcast, I have given so much to this land up here, and to take one otter in 16 years, I think that's, I think it's overdue. But I respect it so much. I'm proud to be out there doing it and doing it, solo. It's important for me to do it solo. I have my whole life have done sort of self-appointed apprenticeships. I do a lot of reading, I do a lot of listening, and learning, and then I go out and I do it myself. And in this case, that's what I'm doing. It's my rookie season for otter. I'm 8 days into it and I don't have one. I think I'm getting close, and I'm really hopeful that tonight when I check my sets that I'm going to have one. But even if I don't, if I have to leave in 2 days and roll out of here, which I do, get back to my family, my 2 little beautiful boys in Florida, when I get back there, if I don't have an otter, if I didn't get one, I'm not going to be upset. I'm just so happy to be up here and have this opportunity. And I mean that. There's nothing I would rather do than this right now, and that's the thing. I think you've got to find in your life the things that you're passionate about and pursue them. So few people do that. And you might say, well, I don't have the time. There's 1,000 excuses, but I made the time to come up here and do this, and it's not without sacrifice, of course, but this is one of the few times where it's like John time. Okay. I'm up here, and for all those that are like, well, why didn't you call me? I didn't know you were coming up here. I love you all. Okay. But this is for me. I had to do this alone. I had to concentrate 110% of my energy on it. And that's what I do, and I love it. And I was thinking the other day, why? Why do you love this so much? Why does this, why does this really trip your trigger, man? What's going on? And I thought about it. Like, I'm meticulous at what most of the things that I'm into, have a meticulous component to it. And trapping is meticulous. And, the scent game is meticulous. How your traps are prepared, how they're maintained, how they're set, all of that is meticulous. So you've got to understand your equipment, its strengths, its weaknesses, how to use it and employ it properly. And, hey, I was an infantry officer, an airborne ranger for 20 years, and this to me, and then before that, an athlete all the way, through, and up into college, a competitive athlete. And, a hockey player as an example. And here I am getting all my gear ready to go. And it's just, yesterday, and I was sitting there strapping it on thinking, this is a lot like I'm getting ready to get out on the ice. I got that same sense of excitement, that same sense of, focus. And that's what I absolutely love, is to be on a mission and to be up here by myself. Of course, there's, there might be an element of danger to this. It's not much. It's fairly low risk. It's a little more risky than sitting on the couch eating potato chips, I can tell you that. But I'm packing a piece back there, and I normally don't, but I am now, and it's like being Jeremiah Johnson. I'm the only one out there. I'm not going to see anybody. I haven't seen anybody in those woods for 8 days. Not a soul. I haven't heard anybody. I haven't seen anybody. I go out there and I stay out there all day from almost sun up. I let the sun come up, shake out my headgear, have some coffee, and then I go out there and I'm back just before or as the sun's setting, and it's a long day, but I love it, and to me, that sense of adventure, understanding your environment, in this case, learning about doing something, with your hands and your mind, and you look at this situation and it's problem solving. Like I see a sign. I see what he's doing here. Okay, there's a river. Obviously he's going into that. He's coming out here. He's going. There's a hole in the ice. He's coming out of the. So you've got to solve this thing and set up on him. And there's lots of methods, okay, to do that. But you got to do that well. Requires a skill set. And trappers don't typically give up their secrets. There's books out there you can read, and the guys are talking about what they're doing, and you can learn from that. But there's nothing like going out there and doing it. Like last night, everything so far in 8 days has been great. But I'll give you an example. All right, last night I'm out there, and it's getting late. And I'm in the water. I'm up to my crotch and moving water. It's cold. All right, I've been through 3 sets of gloves. My hands could be clubs. And oh, by the way, a year ago I had my hip replaced. Okay, so it's back. It's probably 95%. But there's lots of things going on. I'm a beat up old soldier. I'm out there and 57 years old out there in the waterways, in the back country in northern Wisconsin out there chasing otters. I love it. And so I got my Argo with all my truck in it, and I'm setting these traps, right? And it's been a great day. And the first set that I worked on for a couple hours, a new set, was super pleased with how that worked. And one was underwater, was a conibear, a body gripper, and I set up, and was really satisfied with how that set looked, and was in a new spot that I hadn't trapped before, where I found fresh signs. So I was really pleased with that. And then getting back in there and doing that was about a half a day, believe it or not, prepping for that, and I won't go into a lot of those details, but that's what I did. And then I went to another set where I had established a couple of more traps. And the ice flows had disrupted the trap sets, and it just was, it wasn't, there was no sign. There was 8 days ago, but there hasn't been sign in this one spot. We call the mussel shell. There was no sign, has not been sign. But now the tributaries open completely. The water's a lot higher. That affects things. The ice flows affect things. And my traps had been, disrupted, molested by, the conditions. And they had to be attended to. So I changed up the set. I spent the other half of the day, sorting out what I was going to do with how the conditions had changed. And here's the other thing. Guess what? Conditions change all the time. I don't care what you're doing, whether it's the weather, the environment, business, conditions. The conditions change. And if you're not adapting to the conditions, then you're not going to be successful. All right. And so, I was like, these sets are no good anymore. So I'm having to adjust them, which is what I've been doing every day, because this time of year, things are changing rapidly. Snow's melting, ice is flowing. And then in the last 3 days, it's been snowing and got cold again. So things are continually in a state of change and flux. And so, anyway, I'm out there, and the first 2 sets go good, and then the third trap I'm setting, and this is a big trap. You get your finger caught in this guy. This is a Bridger number 5. It could be used for a wolf. It's that kind of trap. It's a 4-coiler. It's very strong. If you got your finger caught in that trap, you probably would. If it was your tip of your finger, you might lose it, seriously. I mean, I think you would probably have to go, I don't know if you'd have to go to the hospital, probably, maybe, depending on how bad you got, if it got you deep in the knuckle or something like that, you might be all right. But if it got your fingertip, sorry about your bad luck, dude. Your finger's going to look different the rest of your life. It's a serious trap. And anyway, I can't get this thing set. It's snowing. It's, my hands are like clubs. They're cold. And I'm just screwing it up left and right. Honest to God, I just getting pissed off at myself for screwing this up. And it's late in the day, and I've been at it, and everything's gone perfect. But at the end, I'm like fumbling the football. And I finally, but I'm tenacious, man. I mean, I got no quit in me. I don't think anyway. I'm like, hey, you need to ranger through this. Suck it up, Buttercup. And get this last trap set, because this is what was in your mind all day long, and this is what it's got to look like. And I'm screwing it up, left and right. Everything I'm doing is just, and it's dangerous. And I almost get snapped like 3 times trying to set this trap. And I can't figure it out. And I'm tired, and I look down and I go, dude, I said to myself, dude, you need to stop what you're doing, okay? You need to pull this trap, and you need to get out of here, okay? Because you're just going to get hurt right now. Stop. So, that's what I did. I pulled the trap, collected my kit, got in the Argo, and came back to camp, and had a bowl of yogurt and fruit, and flushed out my headgear and thought about it. That's the thing. I was upset with myself, for not accomplishing exactly what I wanted to. But at the end of the day, here's a life lesson for you. Okay. Don't always focus on what's wrong. Try to focus on what's right. Right? Think about that for a second. Focus on what's right, not just what's wrong. Because if I ended that day focusing on what went wrong there, I talk a lot about getting down to the 5-yard line and fumbling, or not fumbling. It's like, talk to my team about that all the time. He says, you just spent all this time driving down this field, to get on the 5-yard line, to get to the end, get to the goal line and fumble the football. Let's not do that. Okay. Let's have enough energy and combat power and wits about ourselves and resource at the 5-yard line to cross the goal line and put some points up on the board. Let's not fumble and do something stupid now that we got down here, right? Which a lot of teams do. It does happen. So here I am at the 5-yard line last night as the sun is going down and failing light, and I'm screwing it up left and right, but I gotta stop. I gotta check myself. Dude, you're gonna fumble. You're gonna put your finger in this trap, and then you're gonna be really sorry. Okay. So I stopped what I was doing. I didn't complete exactly what I wanted. I got back here, and I was like kind of upset with myself, and I was like, dude, look at how glorious that day was. All right, think about that. You got all your traps set. It's perfect. You didn't get one trap set, shake it off. And you got to get out of it just like that. Okay, you got to get out of it. Whatever's bringing you down, you got to get out of it. So, I went to bed last night thinking, that was a great day. And I thought about every single trap I set and what might be happening today out there or at night, and so it's all good. Don't get hung up, on the little things. If it doesn't go your way, regroup and then go back at it. And that's what I'm going to do this morning. I'm going to go examine that trap. I actually know what was going on because I looked at it a little bit last night, and I'm like, aha, my the travel on my trap for you trappers out there was incorrect, and there's lots of things going on there. Then the dog was a little loose, needs to be tightened, and it was all my fault. See, that's the other thing. It was all my fault. I had not properly prepped that trap. In other words, tried to set it, make sure that the travel is right, make sure that everything is perfect on that trap. I had dyed it. I had done many of the right things, but what I had failed to do is actually set that trap and see how the trigger is on it. So it's my fault, like most things, I mean, you can circle back. You need to accept the responsibility for things that you do and things that you fail to do. A lot of people don't do that, but I think you should be, honest with yourself. You don't have to beat yourself about the head and neck. But that was my fault, and I'm going to fix that this morning. And guess what? I'm going back tonight, and that trap's going to go in, and it's going to not take me all day. It's going to take me about 15, 20 minutes because I know exactly what I'm going to do. I know where it's going to get set. I've already prepped the site, and the trap's going to be right as rain, and it's all going to be happy and good. All right. hopefully the first set I check's got an otter in it, and then I can pull all my traps and get ready to get out of here. But that's might be wishful thinking. I don't know. But anyway, so that's, otter trapping, and I just wanted to, mention some of these things, because it's, there's a lot of life lessons out there in the woods, and our mission, honor, connect, and heal. You go, what does this have to do? What are you doing up there, man? What does this have to do with our combat wounded veterans? Well, in this case, the camp up here, it needs to be tended to. You can't just ignore these facilities. And so somebody's got to come up here and make sure everything's in good working order and keep it that way and prep for the upcoming season. So that's what I do in the springtime. And I just happen to roll out and, get an otter tag. And so it's a little John time right now, and I'm very happy to be up here doing this. And again, for those that are, upset with me because I didn't call you or tell you about it, I said on a Facebook post that, on my personal page anyway, that this was a highly compartmentalized operation. And it was, it was compartmentalized in my head. And I shared it with my, a couple of family members who had to know where I was going and what I was doing. But for the most part, I was up here by myself, solo, and I contacted a couple of people that I needed to see up here. Of course, Mike Reed, I think, is the only, and Bob Bolt's the only two guys that I've met since I've been up here. The rest of it's been out in the woods, and that's the way I like it. So anyway, so that's it. I've got 2 more days to do this, and I'm super excited about it. And I'll just I'll talk a little bit about the methods, and then I'm going to end the podcast because I think that's all there is to be said about trapping otters. But again, my rookie season, I'm learning a lot, having a ton of fun, and really there's 2 ways to get these guys, okay? And you've got body gripping traps, okay? And there's different kinds of body gripping traps, but I use the brand is Conibear. I use 330s. I've got 220s. They're a little smaller. I haven't used those yet, but the 330s are out there and deployed. I use them for beaver as well. It's a very dangerous trap, if you will, but it's a body gripper, and it usually gets them, right behind the head and in the body, and it grips their body, and they expire rapidly. Okay, I mean, it's instantaneous or close to instantaneous death, so there's no suffering. Boom, they're done. Okay. So that's a very effective way. If you can get them in a body gripper, it's, good night, sweet sister. And so that's a very viable, often used and good method. The other is in a foothold trap and with a drowning set. Okay. So, the otters aren't suffering. They put their foot in the trap, snap, and some cold steel hits them and they don't like it. And if you set it up right, it's got an anchor point, 2 anchor points, one at the shoreline, or, close to the shoreline typically, where the trap is anchored, and there's a cable line. It's usually aircraft cable. That's what I've got, 6 or 8 foot cable. I think I even have a 10, but anyway, some aircraft, rated cable, very, very solid, and that runs down. That gets anchored in vicinity of the trap on the shoreline, or just at the shoreline, is anchored there with a stake system. And then out into the river, at least in 3 feet of water, is an anchor point. Okay, and what I've been using is I got some burlap bags from the local hardware store, and I fill them full of river rock, and then I lace them up with trapping wire, and that's the other anchor point. I put it out in the deepest water I can get to, about 10 feet away. And so it's, under 3 feet of water, greater than 3 feet of water. And so there's a slide system. So the otter puts his foot in the trap, snap, and he has to go to the water. It's his escape route, right? So there's this big old, in this case, Bridger number 5, trap on his foot, and which is connected to this anchor line cable, which is anchored at the shoreline and the terminal end in the river in this, big burlap bag full of rocks. You could use a cinder block, but or something like that. But, I use what's available out there, and that's river rock. So fill up this burlap bag and throw it out there, place it properly in the river. And that cable from the shoreline is taut, and then there's a slide system. Okay, it's a unique little thing. It'll only allow the slide to go one way, down towards the anchor point in the river. If he tries to go back to shore, it won't allow him to do that. The slide will only go one way. It's a one-way deal. So he goes down there and obviously drowns. Okay, so it doesn't take very long, and it's over. And there's your otter, hopefully. So those are the two sets, two of the most effective and used methods for trapping otter. Body grippers, and then drowning sets with footholds. So that's what I got going on out there. But anyway, so I hope you enjoyed that. I know a lot of people were asking me, to do something like this and talk a little bit about otter trapping. And that's what's been happening up here. And I appreciate your time, and I appreciate you listening. And remember, to help a hero. All right. In this case, our combat wounded heroes. The foundation serves our Purple Heart recipients, and we introduce them to the great outdoors and put them on these wonderful missions like this. Surround them with other wounded veterans and communities and people who care. And, of course, the great outdoors. And the combination of all of those components yields a lot of healing, okay? And that's why we're here. Today's segment is the final segment 3 in otter trapping. I was up in the Northwoods of Wisconsin, and just to refresh your memory, if you're not haven't followed the other 2 episodes, just to briefly recap, I drew an otter tag this year for the first time in 17 years. Was able to actually go out and pursue trapping an otter, and did that on our property in the Northwoods of Wisconsin. So I was very, very excited about that. And I had a kind of a short window, but I dedicated 2 weeks of my life to go up there and do it in March. And it was just for me personally, one of the greatest outdoor experiences I've ever had. I'm pretty much a self-taught trapper. I did go through the Wisconsin Trappers Association course, which is a requirement. I did that, probably 20 years ago. And have been up there trapping in the Northwoods of Wisconsin ever since. And but never had a chance to pursue otter. I had seen some sign, not much. Really the best time to be trapping them is typically in the springtime. When there's still some snow and things are breaking up, you can kind of see, where they're going and what they're doing. When the water starts flowing up there, things get a little exciting if you're interested in pursuing otter. And so that's what happened when I got up there. There was still, my gosh, in some cases, 3-4 feet of snow and some drifts. So it was difficult. The only way I was getting back there was with the Argo. And Mike Reed and I had to put the tracks on the Argo in order for it to go over the top of the snow and get back to where I needed to go and to do this. But, it was really neat because, once you get close, to their habitat and you're in their space, if you will, and you can see their tracks. And, for me, it's hard to describe that feeling. I know lots of sportsmen probably get it when you see a big, track of a big buck or, a wolf track or something like this. I don't know. I can't explain really what it does to me inside, but I'm like laser beam focused, immediately. And I just feel so in so much awe
of being so close or having been in the presence of one of these, amazing critters, and go, that's the evidence right there. It's irrefutable. That's evidence of an otter. And so for 17 years, I've wanted to do this and just take one otter. I think, folks ought to just who think that's shouldn't be doing that kind of thing. Well, it's one otter. The population is very healthy. Taking one otter in 17 years, I think I deserve it. I'm just going to go out and say that. But anyway, I took lots of photos. I wish I could show them to you here on the podcast. But I have one video here that I'm gonna try to play. You can hear the audio because in the background is an unnamed tributary. There's actually no name. The Department of Natural Resources of the state of Wisconsin officially has it as an unnamed tributary that runs through the property and eventually connects with the Jump River some miles away. But it's a wonderful little series of interconnected currycomb creeks, I guess, some of which are probably spring-fed. And the beavers, God bless them, have created a lot of habitat back in there. Now, Camp Hackett is a big chunk of property. It's 410 acres of wild and remote habitat that we, and me in particular, a lot of other folks too as well, have done a lot of work on that, to improve the habitat. But those beavers create their own habitat, and they typically don't file for a permit. They just decide to do whatever they do. And they've taken some of my trails up there and used the trails, the four-wheeler trails that I've carved into the woods, using that as an embankment for their, pond that they're creating. And that's what they do. They create habitat. Well, it's a double-edged sword, of course. But what's nice about it, if you're, into fur-bearing critters, ponds, and waterfowl and this kind of thing, ponds, water is the key to life, right? So beavers create ponds, and in those ponds, aquatic life happens, frogs and fish and all these things like this. And that's good, right? For the other, critters that are out there, because I'm sure otters eat frogs, and I know they eat fish. And so there's habitat there. And there's a remote part of the property that has, it's difficult to get to. Especially when there's three feet of snow. One of my photographs is my old Army rucksack. They call it an Alice pack, a large Alice pack. I carried it. Heck, I carried it in combat, and I carried it, for my, I think all of my career, basically, because it's sort of like an old baseball glove. It fits me really well. It still fits me. But it's an old Alice pack with a frame, and I have that picture of that. I loaded it up with all my kit, and I took a picture of it with my snowshoes, and it just it felt good, And so I didn't get back in there and to be able to be amongst them, if you will, felt pretty good. But I'm going to play this for you, and you'll get a chance to hopefully hear the brook and what I have to say, and I'll go on and talk about the results of my trapping for otter, and I'll give you the punchline up front here, a little bit of it. But it was the very last day, and I was pulling the traps. I'd committed to pulling the traps because I had to go. I was at the end of my 2-week period. I had to get on with my life, and it was the very last day when it happened. And I'm going to play this little. Hopefully you can hear this here. All right, here we go.
Well, here's a really interesting little spot. It's got a slide right over there, coming down into the water. That's definitely an otter. I see his tracks, and then there's water flowing up through here, and the beaver pond's above me. So the water's just pouring out of that thing down these two tributaries, which are part of the Jump River unnamed tributary system, if you will. But it's a really good problem to try to solve and figure out how you're going to catch one of these guys. Not enough water to drown them, so you kind of got to use a body gripper. And we'll see what happens.
Okay, so hopefully you heard that. So I get back in there, I have my snowshoes on and I'm busting trail and, I've got these stakes I've cut, two conibear traps, 330 conibear traps. They're the big ones in my rucksack. And so I get to this beaver pond. I knew it was back there. I'd seen it several times. I've been back there several times, but it's kind of it's a ways back in there, and you can only get there by foot. And now I got all this, rucksack and all these traps, and it was like a real army mission. I loved it. And so I get back in there, and the water's flowing, as you could hear. And there's tracks and sign. And I was like, man, I thought it was Christmas. I was like, I'm going to get one. I'm going to get one. This is going to be the place. Because I had been all over that property for 2 weeks. And I had seen some sign, some otter sign. But, they're elusive. And they're there and then they're gone. They range a lot. And so, but this was fresh sign. So fresh it'd slap you. So I'm like, okay. And it was big tracks too. So I was like, all right. And then there was a part of the pond that was open, and it was, maybe the size, the opening in the pond. The pond's probably 2 or 3 acres, of wetland that the beavers created, and so it's an old cedar swamp back there. So it's kind of, it was like something out of the movies, and so there's this hole the size of a large kitchen table in the ice near the shoreline. And things are starting to break up, but you can see that the otter's been coming and going out of this spot. And there's a slide down to it. It's like everything that you've read about, like otter habitat, what do they do? It's all right there. And all of a sudden, this is not the last day. It was the day before when I had discovered this. And so I went back and I collected my thoughts and what I was going to do. And when I got down there, I played that little bit for you. I had my phone with me and I captured it and a little video. And then I went back and it's like, okay, how am I going to solve this problem? And that's what trapping is all about. I guess life's all about that, right? Solving problems, and unique, complex problems. And I'd never done this before, so I'm kind of, self-taught and learning as I go and so much respect. I want to emphasize that. Like so much respect for what I'm about to do. Respect for the outdoors, respect for the animals, respect for the habitat, all of that. So this is, I don't want to say it's a cathartic experience for me, but it's about as close to God as I can get, I'm just saying that's how I feel, when I'm out there, especially alone. And people want, you go out there all by yourself. Yes, I go out there all by myself. And that's the way I will do it. And that's the only way I'll do it. I don't want to be with anybody else. This is me and them and the elements. And, it's just, it's personal, right? So anyway, so I'm looking at this thing and there's this river, right? Well, it's not really a river. It's like a glorified creek, but it's spilling out of the pond that the beavers have created because the ice is melting, the snow is melting. There's a lot of volume coming over the top of the beaver pond now down into this tributary. And then there's an otter slide down there and sign. And so anyway, I ended up having to put I put 2 330 conibears down there, and I also took I had 3 traps there. All 3 were body grippers. I couldn't do a drowning set, so I won't get too deeply into the 2 different types of sets, but there's drowning sets and there's body grippers. The body gripping traps, the 220s, 330 conibears. There's lots of different kinds. But I have 330 conibears and they kill the animal instantly. And so they're very deadly, very effective. And so I had 3 330s that I'd hump back in there. And one of them was, I fixed it to a long pole and I stuck it down into the water and I baited that particular trap, with some shrimp from the local market. And so when I got up there, I set the traps on the second to last day. I think it was Saturday. And Sunday, I waited as long as I could till, I want to say almost dark. because I didn't want to go back there in dark. Bad things happen back there, and you can't see at night and all this. So I had to get all the traps collected. And so I waited until Sunday. And I was like, it was like noon, 1:00, and, and gets dark up there late. So I think it was going to get dark by 5. So I figured I had 4 hours to go back there and collect all my traps. So I got all my traps except for this last spot. I said, all the other traps were empty. Nothing was in it. And the ice flows had been disrupting the traps in the waterways. I mean, it was challenging. So I get back there, and immediately I see on the pond that the beavers created in that hole that was about the size of a large kitchen table where they'd been coming and going. I had a long pole that I'd put down into that and fixed it to the shoreline with a neat little apparatus that I'd come up with, all things that I made, that I found in the forest. And anchored it to the shoreline, and I had that 330 connected to that, and I had it actually below the surface of the ice and secured from the shoreline, and felt like Jeremiah Johnson. It was great. And I thought, as soon as I got up, I got there, I looked at it, I was like, oh, it looks like it's been disturbed. And I thought, sure enough, when I pulled that trap up, there was going to be an otter in it, and there wasn't. And I was like, I was just dejected. This is the last day I'm pulling the traps. Been up there for 2 weeks, and but on the other side, okay, where I showed you, or you listened to that video where the running water was for the unnamed tributary, I had put 2 other 330 conibears down there on each one of the branches of that little creek. Okay, the tributary had branched, and I had kind of canalized the movement with some stones. Larger stones and these stakes that I had cut from a fallen pine tree, and I fixed the 330s, submerged them into the water, and thought, well, one of these guys might just decide to get on this tributary, just get in the water like otters do and swim down it, and bam, I'll hopefully I'll get one. And so there wasn't one up above in the beaver pond. So I pulled that trap and I went down below, and I looked at the first one, and it was unmolested. There was nothing in it. And so I got one trap left, right? And I pulled all the traps that were all over the property. I probably had, I don't know, I'd have to say 8 to 10 maybe at that time, different sets out. Various different kinds, and all targeting, the otter. And the very last trap, I looked, and my heart just like poof right in my throat. I was like, I got one. It was like a feeling I've never had. And I get down there, and I just felt like it was Christmas. I felt like I had won the lottery. And there he was, deader than a doornail in the conibear trap, and it was a monster, a giant. I showed it to a lot of guys up there in the Northwoods, and they all said the same thing. That's a giant otter, and it was. It was 42. It was 42 inches long. And just a beast, a monster, and I was so happy, and it was so pretty and so amazing. So that's what happened. I got him at the last day, at the last hour. It's like my life. Everything. I'm like last minute Johnny. Everything sort of comes together for me at the last safe moment. And I'm sure it looks like I'd had it all planned, but I really didn't. It was just a bunch of hard work and it ended in an amazing result. And so I took the otter that everybody says, I've skinned just about everything there is, that up there, but they say don't try to do an otter if you've never done one before. So leave that to a professional. So what I did is that next day, I packed up and put the otter in it was frozen still, by the way. I mean, it's freezing up there. Even in middle of March, it was well below freezing. So closed up camp and drove down to just outside of my hometown in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and I dropped it off at a tannery, and they tanned it and sent it to me. Now I have it. Here it is. This is June 2022, and for my collection and the foundation's collection of furs that will hang proudly at Camp Hackett, so that the heroes can see, and I can teach them, and they can learn from this experience, and maybe someday join me out there and learn the art and science of trapping fur bearers. And so that's it. Yeah, I mean, it ended very positively in the last safe moment, and I was very, very proud to do that. And I want to thank everybody who helped me do that, because behind the scenes there's always amazing people behind every success story. There's typically a whole host of people who help enable the activity. And in this case, I want to thank Mike Reed, who came up, who lives up there and opened up camp for me. So, moved, probably, 5 or 6 metric tons of snow so that I could get in there with my fifth wheeler. I'm sorry, with the Airstream, with the trailer, and actually open up camp and do this. So, and without Mike and his support, I would have spent most of the time trying to get back in there, just trying to get the trailer back in there, So I want to thank you, Mike, for that. John Carlson helped me with some bait, all my support team for the foundation on the backside that helped me do it. David Kelber with the podcast helped me set this whole thing up so I could communicate to you what had happened. And then, just the rest of my team that, really would allow me to go spend a couple of weeks up there in the Northwoods without having to worry so much about work and my family and everything. So I want to thank everybody who helped me, gave me the opportunity and the freedom to go do this. So anyway, great. I hope you enjoyed that story. And it really was amazing. And so there's the otter story, the otter trapping story in northern Wisconsin. And that's all I have to say about that. Hope everybody has a great day. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. Thank you.
To learn more about the mission of the Wounded Warriors in Action Foundation and how you can get involved, please visit our website at WWIAF.org or follow our social media pages on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and LinkedIn. Thank you for listening to the WWIA Podcast and for helping us honor, connect, and heal our combat wounded Purple Heart heroes through the power of the great outdoors.
If you like what you're listening to here and would like to join our team in our mission to bring healing power and recovery to America's Purple Heart heroes, please become part of our Sponsor a Hero team by clicking on the link in the podcast notes or by going to WWIAF.org/sponsor. That's WWIAF.org/sponsor. Our heroes need you now more than ever. Thank you.